Now celebrating 25 years in business, my good friend Joe Reilly of National Drug Screening is going to take a different perspective on this and sort of give you, the business owner, an understanding of what the law requires of you, what you can do to ensure that your insurance policies, your workman's compensation is not jeopardized by any of these medical marijuana type of products. And so without further ado, I want to introduce Joe Reilly.
Kara, that was great. Actually, about 2 years ago, we got called from a grower, dispenser, or whatever it was. They wanted us to drug test their employees. So we said, sure, why not? That's a great idea, you know. And about a month later, they called us and said, well, we got your first bill. We're going to be making payment. There'll be an armored car coming tomorrow. And we said, bring it on. We're not the IRS. We'll take their money. So people in the marijuana industry are drug testing their employees because their employees aren't people that are, you know, epileptic or, you know, terminally ill and those type of things. And I'm glad you brought up smokable marijuana because a lot of people in Florida don't understand that you can't smoke a joint with a medical marijuana card currently. Now there are forces that are trying to change that, as Tara mentioned, but you know, if you're coming to work and you see one of your employees smoking a joint, and it's clearly a joint, and it clearly smells like marijuana, and you call them in the office and they say, well, I have a medical marijuana card. That doesn't fly because they cannot use smokable marijuana with a medical marijuana card. So be careful about that. There's a news story actually locally that actually insinuated that with an employee. So I am going to change gears a little bit and talk about drug testing in the workplace and how that affects you as a business owner, HR, safety. I've got a 5-point agenda here we're going to kind of go over. And the first one is, you know, as a business, are you drug testing? And so if you are drug testing, there are considerations to make with this whole issue of medical marijuana and potentially even recreational marijuana. And if you have business operations in one of those 10 states that allow recreational marijuana, then you certainly need to make some decisions about drug testing and about drug testing for marijuana. So if you are drug testing, why? Okay, well, safety, productivity, regulation. You might be regulated by the United States Department of Transportation, and you have to do drug testing. And how are you doing it? You can currently do it with urine, with oral fluid, with hair. When are you doing it? Just pre-employment? It's kind of like an idiot test. They stop, you know, using drugs for a week, and they get hired, and that's the only drug test you do, then they're in, okay? But a good program has random testing, post-accident testing, reasonable suspicion testing, return to duty testing if you offer a second chance, and follow-up testing for those same second chance people. Under what authority are you drug testing? I'm going to talk a little bit about this because if you're DOT regulated, the authority is the United States Department of Transportation. If you're in the state of Florida, you might be participating in the Florida Drug-Free Workplace program, which grants you a 5% discount on your workers' comp. So if you're not getting that 5%, you could. Or you're just drug testing because you think it's a good idea, but you better have a company policy that talks about how you're drug testing. And are you testing for marijuana? So traditionally, we've been testing a 5-panel drug test since the late 80s in the United States. Marijuana, cocaine, amphetamines, opiates, and PCP. Why PCP? I don't know, because nobody really does it anymore, but we do get some positives around the country in scattered areas. But so with marijuana, are you maybe you want to drop marijuana from your testing panel? Maybe you want to leave it out. Or maybe you want to keep testing for it because, again, there's a safety and a productivity area, okay? But let's be very clear, as Tara mentioned, there's no prescription for marijuana. Somebody says, I have a prescription for marijuana. Somebody said that on a news clip. I almost fell over. Okay. And there's no current testing methodology to show current impairment from marijuana use. So people say, well, I don't care what they do on the weekend, I care what they do at work. Well, when they're at work, there's no way to tell if they did it on the way to work, over the weekend, or at lunchtime. There's no way to tell that currently with the methodologies that we have here in the United States. So what are your options? First and foremost, a lot of you have a drug-free workplace policy currently. Have you looked at it in the last 5 years? Because there are changes in society and in regulatory matters in Florida that require you now to look at your drug-free workplace policy, and your senior leadership needs to make decisions about marijuana, about medical marijuana, and if the state goes to recreational, about recreational marijuana. So are you going to continue drug testing? Are you going to stop drug testing? Are you going to do drug testing if you haven't done it before? Are you going to have a zero tolerance? Marijuana is legal under federal law. It's prohibited under our company policy. You're positive you violated our policy. Or are you going to drop marijuana from your panel? Are you going to make an accommodation for a medical marijuana card holder? That's a potential option. And there are some states, not Florida yet, there are some states where that better be your option, because if it's not, you're going to get sued and you're going to lose if you haven't made an accommodation. But that's not Florida yet, okay? If you drop marijuana from your policy and your employee has an accident and kills 5 people and it turns out they were smoking marijuana on the job, what kind of liability does that potentially cause? So there's decisions that every business has to make, and in my experience so far, they haven't been making those decisions, okay? People are living with the same drug-free workplace policy they had written in 1993 when Florida passed the Drug-Free Workplace Act. So just 5 seconds on drug testing. We collect a specimen, whatever it is. We get it to a laboratory for testing. The test result goes to a medical review officer who rules out prescribed medications. So if you're taking codeine for back pain, you're not going to get reported as a positive because the medical review officer is going to rule that out with a private conversation with you that doesn't go to your employer. But if you say you have a prescription for marijuana, the medical review officer is going to say there's no such thing as a prescription for marijuana. We're reporting this as a positive. So work it out with your employer. And the employer gets the results from the medical review officer. If you don't get the results from the medical review officer, you get them directly from a lab or a drug testing provider that you have, you've got some liability issues. You've got some concern because they prescribed medications haven't been ruled out. And when people talk about a false positive, that only happens if the process isn't done correctly. If the process is done correctly with a lab test, confirmation of a positive with more sophisticated technology, and review by a medical review officer or licensed physician, if that process occurs correctly, there's no such thing as a false positive. A drug-free workplace, just real quick on that, what is it? Because it's not just drug testing. Again, do you have a policy? Are you educating your supervisors and training them on how to implement the policy and how to recognize signs and symptoms of someone potentially being under the influence of alcohol or illicit drugs at work? Do your supervisors know how to do that? Really important. Do your employees understand your policy? And today with marijuana, do they know what your policies are about marijuana? That's important. EAP, do they have a resource to get help if they are a substance abuser? And then finally, drug testing. So we looked at those key components to a drug-free workplace. And what's really important in making decisions and how we're going to operate, how we're going to put a policy together, is what rules apply. So if you're only in Florida, those rules apply, but if you operate in multiple states, you've got multiple rules that may apply, and they may be different. Every medical marijuana law in every state that has one is somewhat different, and some of them are far different than others. Some have employer protections, some have employee protections, and some are kind of silent on the issue. But if you currently have a drug-free workplace program, it's probably a Florida drug-free workplace, or a DOT regulated program, or a non-DOT program, or you're a federal contractor that's required to have a drug-free workplace program. You get paid from the federal government for contracts and things that you do. We have a lot of defense contractors here in this area. But be clear that a company still has a right to have a drug-free workplace policy as well as the ability to enforce it. This has not gone away, and Florida is not a state with an employee protection requiring accommodations. If you're DOT regulated, you have to do certain things. And you have to test for marijuana, and it is prohibited, period. It falls under federal law. Florida Drug-Free Workplace Program is a voluntary program. You get a benefit for following it, but you have to follow it. There are certain things that you have to do, okay? And you can get a benefit if someone has an accident and they test positive. You can potentially deny the claim, or your workers' comp company can deny the claim. You do have to renew that program annually with your workers' comp carrier. A lot of people forget to do that. There's no prohibition of testing for marijuana, but it's not required to test for marijuana either. There are 10 substances that you can choose from as to what you want to test for under the Florida Drug-Free Workplace Program. If you're non-regulated and you don't care about the Florida Drug-Free Workplace Program, we call it a non-DOT or non-regulated drug-free workplace. You want to have a policy, you want to update that policy, you want to follow some best practices. All the drug testing in the United States, all the workplace drug testing, kind of stems from 1988 when Ronald Reagan was president, and they passed the Drug-Free Workplace Act of 1988, and they published what's called mandatory guidelines for federal drug-free workplace programs. They actually apply to federal employees, but the DOT followed that program, the state of Florida followed that program, and really those are the best practices that anyone can follow is the current version. They've been tweaked over time of the federal mandatory guidelines for federal drug-free workplace programs. Federal contractors, you have a contract with the government, you're a defense contractor, you build missiles, you build night vision goggles, whatever it is. You're required to have a drug-free workplace, and there are 6 requirements. In my experience, most federal contractors do drug testing and forgot about these 6 requirements. And you don't see drug testing as one of them. You see that it says you have to be a drug-free workplace, well, you kind of assume that means drug testing, but it's actually not required. You do have to have a policy. You do have to have training and awareness programs. You do have to require employees to notify you if they're convicted of a drug criminal statute. You do need to notify your contracting agency if that employee notifies you of that. And you need to impose penalties or require rehabilitation of that employee. And finally, you need to make a good faith ongoing effort to maintain a drug-free workplace program. Most people I see, defense contractors, are not doing those things. They do drug testing only and they think they're in compliance. So what rules apply? Again, very important, what rules apply? Now is the time to review your drug testing policies and programs. Which program applies to your business? Again, are you in compliance with those applicable rules for your business? If you're in multiple states, there's multiple applicable rules. Are you currently conducting drug testing? And will you continue to do so? Will you drop it? Will you drop marijuana? Will you make an accommodation for a medical marijuana patient? Follow the regulations and follow your policies consistently. I do expert witness testimony for cases involving workplace drug testing, and sometimes the cases go really bad because the company didn't follow their own policy. They forgot to go read it when something happened and follow the policy. They start making decisions and didn't follow the policy. Follow your own policy. Educate employers and supervisors. Think about right now in your business, do your employees know the consequences of testing positive for marijuana, or do they know if they are a medical marijuana card holder, how that affects their employment? They should know that. So you need to educate them. Okay? And if you allow people to be under the influence of marijuana at your workplace, if you drop testing for marijuana, if you don't have a drug testing program, you don't have a drug-free workplace program, there's lots of people in this state that are smoking marijuana illegally, and guess what? They have poor concentration and lack of focus. They have inconsistent work quality, impairment of hearing, vision, and short-term memory issues, decreased productivity or erratic work patterns, absenteeism, tardiness, unexplained disappearances, carelessness, mistakes, and judgment. This is your ideal employee, right? Okay? I don't care what they do at home, but you don't know whether they did it at home or they did it on the way to work or during work. Okay? And people that smoke pot, they don't have a time clock. They punch in and punch out. I'll smoke a joint now. They smoke it when they want to smoke it. Okay? And people that use marijuana often lead to other drugs, and they hang out with people that may use other drugs. Okay? And they can be liability from accidents caused by an employee that was under the influence of marijuana. Okay? So how do you stand firm with marijuana use in your workplace? Act with a sense of urgency to make decisions, update your drug-free workplace policy, add language that deals with marijuana and other drugs. And if you're not testing for synthetic opiates, hydrocodone, hydromorphone, oxycodone, oxymorphone, you're not picking up the opiates that people are using today, other than heroin. When you test for opiates without synthetic opiates, without expanded opiates, you're only capturing codeine, morphine, and heroin. So you might be missing those prescribed drugs that are abused. Know the safety-sensitive and other work-related risks associated with marijuana and other impairing substances. There are risks. And if you have safety-sensitive positions, certainly someone that's smoking pot cannot be working in those safety-sensitive positions. Create a culture of safety, and that involves education and training. A culture of safety. You're going to save a lot of money if you don't have accidents, right? Okay? Add as an essential job function. This is really important if we get into recreational marijuana, okay? The ability to work in a constant state of alertness and a safe manner. You can't do that if you're high, okay? And put all the pieces together to form a good company policy, a good strategy. Work with your legal team to have a compliant program to stand firm when dealing with marijuana in your workplace. You've got to make decisions. Okay? So my final thoughts with all that, and I cut it a little bit short because I wanted to get right to the point. Okay? Because I could talk really all day on drug testing, all day. And we could do a whole nother session on CBD. So my one comment on CBD is people should take it at their own risk, because it's supposed to be low-level THC, but people are testing positive when taking CBD oils that they buy at a local head shop, because you don't know where it was made, you don't know how it was made, you don't know what's in it, and if you test positive, you violated your company's program, because they don't know if it was CBD, they don't know, and there's no way to prove it. Okay, so if you get a marijuana positive, don't make get any positive. Don't make a hasty decision. Talk it through. If they do claim they're a qualifying medical marijuana patient, talk it through some more, okay? If pre-employment testing or employment testing is required, go through with the testing. Just because someone says, well, I got a medical marijuana card, that doesn't mean you don't do your company required pre-employment test. Because they say they have a medical marijuana card. Okay? Because if you say, well, we can't hire you, and then they go, they're driving down the street and they see the billboard, Morgan & Morgan, And they come back and say that they didn't hire me. All I did was told them I had a medical marijuana card. I didn't tell them I smoked marijuana. I didn't tell them I used marijuana. So be careful about that. Gather all the information, review your policies, review the facts, review the circumstances before you fire somebody or refuse to hire somebody when they claim they have a medical marijuana card. You may want to talk to your attorney. Talk to an industry expert. Keep everything confidential. Really important, keep everything confidential. I look forward to the question and answer time with Tara. I think she did a great job on the legal end of it. I probably got 25 questions for you. And we look forward to that, and happy to be with you here today.